just north of my gutter, where everything's on order for you. Where it's sweet like a potion, feel the heat, feel the motion, margarita's hot from head to her shoe. Oh.
We're heading to the rough and tumble western landscape for some good old-fashioned humor? That's right, it's a music, comedy, sexploitation western. Proof that Hollywood isn't afraid to randomly mix any of the genres together. We're still up all night, and this episode we watched Lust in the Dust.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to USA Up All Night with me, Rhonda.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Gottfried, the comedian in the cupboard for USA Up All Night.
In this movie, you'll see two of your favorite stars. Now, if you drink enough beer, you'll start seeing more of your favorite stars.
Stay with me on USA Up All Night.
Welcome to Still Up All Night, the podcast that celebrates the quirky films of USA Up All Night. I'm Travis Yates, joined as always by my co-host, Rob Cady. Rob, how are you?
I am well. And yourself?
I'm fantastic.
Excellent.
This, being that we were probably in high school when we, watched all these films, it's only fair that we take a summer break. So we did that. But now we're back watching awesomely bad films for you. So I'm excited, Rob, to jump back in this. You ready?
Heck yeah.
Man, this week we've got quite a find. 1985's Lust in the Dust. I mean, it's a comedy western with some sophomoric sexploitation hijinks thrown in for good measure. Rob, this is a mix of genres that only comes around so often, though it's certainly not new. Laurel and Hardy even had a slapstick western comedy with 1937's Way Out West. There's a Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying, but I bet they didn't have singing in there.
Right? There's a 1969 western parody starring James Garner, Support Your Local Sheriff. And of course, you've got Blazing Saddles, the gold standard, and some others that stand out. Three Amigos, Back to the Future 3, City Slickers, and more recently, Shanghai Noon, Ridiculous Six, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and A Million Ways to Die in the West. Thoughts on those kind of mixed, blended genres of westerns?
A lot of hit and miss in there. I enjoyed some of them, like most recently, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. That's hard to ramble out. Yeah, mouthful. I enjoyed that one. Of course, City Slickers is a blast, but this one sort of stands out even different, sets itself apart from even all those.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to pull off because, nothing about the Western is funny. So you're right. Your writers need to be talented to mine that landscape for the humor. Did you see what I did there, Rob? Landscape. Westerns are known for their sweeping landscapes. All right. Anyway, it is tricky. But it every now and again a real gem comes along. But before we get to this gem, it's time for our pop culture rewind, and we're taking the pulse of society in March of 1985. Now, technically, Rob, this film debuted in November of 1984 at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, but its theatrical release was March 1st, 1985, so that is the date that we're sticking with. Rob, our top movies at the box office are by far the strongest collection since we've started the Pop Culture Rewind.
Really?
Take a guess at the top movie at the time, and I'll give you a hint. It's a buddy cop flick.
Eddie Murphy?
Yep.
And why is the name of the movie entirely eluding me right now?
Because we're in our 40s and we're starting to age. Beverly Hills Cop comes in at number 1. The Harrison Ford thriller Witness was number 2. One of my favorite movies of all time, The Breakfast Club, comes in at number 3. Number 4 is the road trip movie starring John Cusack and Daphne Zuniga, The Sure Thing. And rounding out our top box office 5 for March of 85, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Your favorite genre there.
Yeah.
So there is something for everyone on this list. I mean, you've got John Hughes films, you've got, classic Eddie Murphy, Harrison Ford, of course, is in there. So what a list, right?
No kidding. And what a way to make you feel old, rattling that list off.
No kidding. But what a time for movies. Movies in the theater at the time included Mask, The Last Dragon, Vision Quest, Amadeus, Desperately Seeking Susan, and Police Academy 2. I mean, can you imagine seeing all that on the marquee?
Interesting to see all the comedies.
Yeah.
Too. And it feels like, that is no longer a thing in theatrical releases.
Yeah. Adam Devine just took some heat for this in saying that Marvel has ruined comedies. And he was, of course, taken out of context by, just that headline popping up on social media and everybody, losing their mind. And what he was saying is that with, the success of the Marvel movies and kind of the renaissance, or the return, I should say, of blockbusters, studios are afraid to, take a chance on comedies now, the way they weren't back in the 80s and 90s maybe.
Yeah, but even then I feel like, because like Will Ferrell's got this new one coming out with the voicing dogs, and it just doesn't look good. I don't know what's happened to comedy. We're in a strange place, and I don't buy into the whole woke and you can't say things anymore and you can't be funny and all that, but I just feel like it's a lost art, or stuff that comes out is just sort of pandering to the lowest common denominator as opposed to truly being funny.
Yeah, when you remember that John Hughes wrote Ferris Bueller's Day Off in the span of a weekend in a cigarette and coffee fueled writing spree, it really comes down to the writers, right? Good writing good movies and good characters. And so pay the writers, Hollywood studios.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, since we've last been on the air, the writer's strike. I actually, over summer break, took a trip to Hollywood and saw the writer's strike firsthand for a couple of our studio tours, and we honked as loud as we could supporting the writers, and here it is, still going on months later. So
no kidding.
So that's at the crux of any good movie. It comes down to your writers. So all right, moving on. Songs topping the charts of March of '85. One of the best love ballads of all time topping the charts, and it features the artist Andrew Ridgeley. Any guesses, Rob?
Love song?
Yeah. Do you remember who Andrew Ridgeley was? He was the...
Yeah, Wham.
Yeah, that's right. So...
But I can't think of love song.
Careless Whisper, Rob, by Wham.
My sister loved that song.
Yeah, it's a great one. So it was number one, and Andrew Ridgeley, the forgotten member of Wham, the Marty Jannetty to your Shawn Michaels, however you want to...
Yeah, didn't Netflix just do a Wham documentary?
I feel like they did, because I remember thinking, that's one of my top trivia go-tos when I'm at a gathering is, hey, can you tell me who Andrew Ridgeley is? Now this documentary comes out, and I'm like, oh, great, there goes my, talking
probably
point.
Why it's fresh in my mind, because I think I saw something about the documentary.
Yeah. And a great top five here as well, just like we had with our movies. REO Speedwagon's I Can't Fight This Feeling.
Mm-hmm.
David Lee Roth's California Girls, after he had just split from Van Halen to try to go solo. Glenn Fry's The Heat Is On. So you got a guy splitting from his band there. And then Billy Ocean's Loverboy rounds out the top five in that order. So pretty strong time for music as well. Just 85, I think, might be the last great year we've ever had in society, would you say?
I don't know. I feel like there were some strong years in the 90s.
All right, if you say so. You had the 85 Bears here. I mean, it just all went downhill from there.
Top Bears.
Yeah, top Bears. All right, let's see. Sitting atop the TV ratings, as it did for the majority of its run, The Cosby Show was number one the week of March 1st, 1985, followed by Dynasty, Family Ties, the Grammy Awards show, so kind of a special event there, and then Simon and Simon. Rob, fans of any of these shows in our top five?
I think as a family, we watched just about all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, probably Simon and Simon less than the others, but
I was a little too young at the time for Dynasty, but certainly in on all the others. Pretty sure I didn't watch the Grammys that year as well.
Yeah,
but,
I didn't.
But all the others, yeah, absolutely. A few other fun pop culture notes. The TV show Moonlighting debuted on March 3rd on ABC. Moonlighting, of course, would launch the career of Bruce Willis, put him into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
And, though I wasn't quite old enough to fully grasp the show's narrative, my mom was a huge fan. So shout out to Maury, the saint, my mom, the saint. And thankfully, I watched most of the series and remember enjoying it, even as a kid. Did you watch Moonlighting, Rob?
Absolutely, yeah. My sister was a giant fan of it, being a couple of years older than myself, and I sort of just tagged along. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
On March 6th, Rob, Mike Tyson would have his first professional fight, knocking out Hector Mercedes. It was the first of many KOs, of course, for Iron Mike. On March 18th, Capital Cities Communications acquired ABC for $3.5 billion. It was the first time that a network was sold since the advent of television in the 1940s. Capital Cities Communications was owned by Tom Murphy and Dan Burke. Rob, these guys were the Vince McMahon of television affiliates. If you're familiar with how McMahon put all of the wrestling territories out of business in the wrestling world, they started with the ownership, these two, Murphy and Burke, they started with the ownership of just one station in Albany, New York, with the business model of investing in programming while cutting costs. So that helped them amass 7 TV stations and 12 radio stations, but they were still just fourth the size of ABC. Nevertheless, Capital Cities Communications purchased ABC, who was running third place behind NBC and CBS in the network wars, which at the time, kids, there was only 3 networks.
Yeah.
Like I said, $3.5 billion.
That's crazy to think of, 80s money in the billions.
Yeah. They became known as Capital Cities ABC Incorporated, and they stuck with their model of cutting costs, eventually overtaking CBS in the ratings by the late 1980s. And perhaps the most important nugget out of all of this is that a plucky young executive who had been slowly rising through the ranks of ABC since 1974 caught the eye of Murphy and Burke after their acquisition of ABC. That executive, Bob Iger, who would, of course, become the head of ABC Entertainment in 1989. Capital Cities ABC Inc. would merge with Walt Disney in 1995, and then Iger would go on to become CEO of Disney. So,
taking a lot of heat in social media at the moment as well for his comments.
Yeah, but a big day in pop culture there on March 18th, 1985. And the implications that it would have a kind of trickle-down effect for a lot of careers. How about Rhonda Shear? In 1985, she was pretty busy. It was a busy year for our favorite Up All Night host. She appeared in 2 episodes of the wildly popular TV show Dallas, as well as an episode of Cheers. So
God, I don't think I remember that.
Yeah, popping up all over the place. She parlayed those TV guest appearances into a couple of movie roles. Doin' Time, a comedy that featured Muhammad Ali.
Interesting.
And then she had a starring role in the comedy Basic Training. Rob, do you remember Basic Training?
I vaguely remember that. I know I've seen it. I'd probably have to go refresh my memory with a trailer or something like that. But yeah, I know I've seen it.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw it on Friday or Saturday night in your teen years because it aired on USA Up All Night. So we'll have to add that to the queue for sure. And Gilbert Gottfried was ramping up his Hollywood career as well. The prior year, he starred in a dramedy called The House of God. And in 1985, he was cast in Bad Medicine, the medical school comedy that starred Steve Guttenberg and Alan Arkin. I mean, what?
Yeah, I don't think I'm familiar with that movie either.
Bad Medicine. And I'm not sure, I haven't checked the archives if that aired on USA Up All Night, but we'll have to check into that. I want to see that regardless. And RIP to Alan Arkin, who we just lost recently. So that was a sad one. But so Bad Medicine, doing our Basic Training, a couple to put on the list here for future views.
Yeah, I just looked and the image of Bad Medicine looks familiar. I'm not sure I've seen it. And I've definitely seen Basic Training. It doesn't appear either one is easily available for viewing.
Yeah, Curtis Armstrong is in that as well. So Gilbert Gottfried. I mean, it's got to be gold. So, a lot happening in 1985 pop culture. Rob, any other memories of '85?
Nothing that jumps out at me.
Yeah, it was a while ago. So.
Horror movies. Yeah,
other
than the Friday the 13th.
Now, was the New Beginning? Corey Feldman was in the one prior to that, isn't that correct? Is that the one where he, at the end of the movie, pulls the hockey mask out in the hospital room in the drawer?
God, they all run together.
Or maybe that's the one where he did that because it's a new beginning, and then they kind of passed on the legacy of Jason from person to person.
Oh yeah. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the Jason flicks, and I know I've seen the bulk of them, but yeah, they definitely run together.
Okay, Rob. Well, before we get to the movie Lust in the Dust, let's take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsor.
Burger King presents a musical message to Herb.
Come on now, Herbert, don't be shy. You're gonna love plain broiling when you give it a try. It ain't number one, it's what's happening. Cause what plain broiling does is lock the flavor in. So wherever you hide, come on, show your face and take the plain broiled burger. A plain broiled burger. You're gonna love the taste.
All right, it's getting a little dusty in the studio, Rob, because we're heading to the desert for Lust in the Dust, and it's fitting that we finally have a Western on the podcast because Westerns were sort of the original B movie. During the silent era and the early classical Hollywood era, Westerns were B-movie schlock. Many people don't realize that John Wayne, the most recognizable Western star this side of Clint Eastwood, got his start in low-budget Westerns. I don't know if you are how familiar you are with early John Wayne.
I mean, familiar, but not, had no idea they were, low-budget B flicks.
Yeah, he was ready to give up his Hollywood career, and it wasn't until John Ford's Stagecoach in 1939 that really launched Wayne into superstardom and brought the Western into the forefront as a legit profitable genre.
Elevating the genre.
Yeah. I mean, the next 2 decades would be the heyday of the Western. The American New Wave movement, which brought new filmmakers with gritty, realistic stories. The age of the profitable Western during that time was killed off for quite a while, and it returned to its low-budget roots in the form of spaghetti Westerns that were filmed in Europe, primarily in Italy, on smaller budgets, hence the spaghetti Western. Mm-hmm. But in 1946, during the golden age of Westerns, a Western called Duel in the Sun was made. And it was so graphic with sexual content that it couldn't pass the Hays Code, essentially the MPAA ratings of its time. And the movie was nicknamed Lust in the Dust. So the movie was eventually edited heavily before its release. And now we know, the origins of what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And so in 1985, long after the Western's best days, Fox Run Productions and New World Pictures, our good friends here at Still Up All Night, decided to make a sexploitation comedy based on the Duel in the Sun's nickname. So a lot of history to wrap up.
History you dug up for that.
Just to get us to this point, we had to go through all that just to get us to this infamous 1985 movie. Yeah. It was written by Philip John Taylor, who was primarily a TV writer, including 16 episodes of Mork and Mindy. So that's
one of our family favorites growing up.
Yeah, so got Nanu. Got some chops there, Philip John Taylor. Lust in the Dust was his first and only of 2 feature film credits. So
interesting.
Short-lived their feature movie career from his writing.
It could be based on the box office for this flick.
Yeah, that might do it.
Been an indication.
Yeah. It was directed by Paul Bartel, who has a really fascinating bio. Were you familiar at all with Bartel before this movie, Rob?
Not, I don't quite remember. I know I did some digging into him, but nothing jumps out.
Certainly,
I know he did some horror.
Yeah, certainly not a household name.
Yeah.
Right. Bartel majored in theater arts at UCLA and received a Fulbright scholarship to study film in Rome. It's like, okay, this guy's going places, right? Roger Corman's brother Gene hired Bartel for his first feature, the low-budget 1970 horror film Private Parts. Not the Howard Stern's biopic, but there's your horror background, right?
Yeah.
After working for Roger Corman, he directed the 1975 Corman-produced cult classic Death Race 2000.
There you go.
I mean, while not a household name, he's got some cult classics in here.
He does, yeah.
In 1982, Bartel self-funded the dark comedy Eating Raoul, which he starred in and directed.
Widely known as well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the film was well received by critics with subtextual messaging about consumption heading into the decade of decadence and consumerism that was the 1980s, of course. So he was kind of ahead of the game there in 82, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Bartel would go on to direct a couple more movies, including the 1986 Tim Conway comedy, The Long Shot. So there you go, Tim Conway in the 80s.
Yeah.
A fun fact, Bartel also has 93 acting credits to his name and often acted in his own movies. And he passed away in 2000 at the young age of 61, so far too soon there.
Yeah, I think I was much more familiar with him as an actor, not realizing he directed.
Yeah. Word is that John Waters was asked to be the director of Lust in the Dust, but because he didn't write it, he turned the movie down. So,
which I have to say, I probably wish he hadn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you hear about, some writers that will write with a specific actor in mind for a character. And in this case, it's almost like this movie was written with a certain director in mind in the hopes that he would do it.
Jump on board, yeah.
Which I think we'd be looking at a different picture altogether if that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that was the case. But, just some really odd kind of, this is such a weird movie just in the actors. And I mean, it stars Tab Hunter, who was a teen idol in the 1950s and 60s, but he wasn't able to translate that status into A-lister status in Hollywood as an adult. On one of his first roles was in a John Wayne film, The Sea Chase, and later that year he'd star in the World War II drama Battle Cry. That was Warner Brothers' most profitable film in 1955. The multi-talented Hunter could also sing. He had a #1 hit for 6 weeks in 1957 named Young Love.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
He's one, it's like you look at the cast of this film and left and right, you're like, oh, hey, that person, this person, that person. And you're familiar with almost all of them on some level. And I just stared at him and I was like, I don't know that I've seen him in anything.
And yet we have, and, we probably heard his stuff on the oldies channel that our parents were playing when we were younger. I mean, that's one of the great things about the Up All Night movies, right? It's that guy and that gal who was in that thing. It's just a haven for those actors and actresses. So in the early 1960s, Hunter had his own sitcom called The Tab Hunter Show. It only lasted one season, likely because of its time slot opposite The Ed Sullivan Show. So unfortunate for any series that's sitting across the dial from that. He continued with starring and supporting roles through the 1960s, but eventually moved to the south of France, appearing only in Italian films for a while. He would return to American cinema with future Oscar winner Curtis Hanson's first movie, the Roger Corman-produced B-horror movie Sweet Kill. Now, Rob, you're the resident horror buff. Are you familiar with Sweet Kill?
I am not. When did you say that was made?
I didn't. I'd have to look it up. And when he came back, I mean, I'm assuming 70s Roger Corman B movie.
Yeah.
But, future Oscar winner Curtis Hanson directing his first movie. So there you go. Sweet kill.
Yeah,
I
I'm
have to look
looking
that
at the image of it now, and it's from 72.
72,
Yeah,
there you go.
I've not seen that image before.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with Curtis Hanson, you should be, and you've probably seen some of his films. He directed The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, L.A. Confidential, 9 Mile, and Chasing Mavericks, among many others. So maybe that director who directed that thing.
Yeah.
We can start a new category for some of those directors that you should know but maybe don't. Hunter would embrace comedy in the 1980s with roles in John Waters' Polyester, Grease 2, and, of course, our film today, Lust in the Dust. Now, Rob, this is pretty cool. In 2005, Hunter released an autobiography. It was Tab Hunter Confidential, The Making of a Movie Star, and it became a New York Times bestseller. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I guess he did have some traction, yeah.
Yeah. In the book, Hunter came out as gay. And he
Interesting.
also discussed a 4-year-long relationship that he had with Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates.
Yeah, yeah.
So an interesting scoop from his book there. You know, Rob, it had to be incredibly difficult for Hunter to be a studio system era male heartthrob, unable to live his life as himself. And, that probably explains his short exile to France in the early 1970s.
Yeah, go get out of Hollywood and be his true self for a little while, probably.
And interesting, like Tab Hunter, Paul Bartel was gay, but unlike Hunter, Bartel did not hide it. And you have to wonder if that led to maybe Bartel's lack of more success in a decade where, the fear and misunderstanding of AIDS made life difficult for gay men. So some interesting facts there on the people involved with this movie.
Yeah.
Tab Hunter passed away in 2018 at the age of 87. So quite
good
the
long life.
Yeah, quite the life for Tab Hunter. And, because of our ages, Rob, we missed the heyday of his career. But, it's great that we
did a lot of TV as well.
Yeah, yeah. And, we get to celebrate him in this episode. So that's cool. Now, starring opposite Hunter is... yes, I don't even have to get there, and it's got you cracking up. It's Divine, the stage name for Harris Milstead, a drag queen best known for roles in John Waters films. So again, we got another John Waters connection here. It was Waters that gave Milstead the stage name of Divine after the two struck up a friendship while living in the same Baltimore neighborhood in the 1960s. Divine would join the group of actors commonly used by Waters, the Dreamlanders. Now, when you're telling the John Waters story, you can't tell it without Divine, who was in Waters' second short 8mm film, Roman Candles, and in his first 16mm film, Eat Your Makeup. And Divine gained notoriety with the role of Babs, the filthiest person alive, in Waters' 1972 film Pink Flamingos. Yeah. The film was distributed by New Line Cinema and gained quite the cult following. Does this ring any bells? Was this this might have been before your time as well? It was for me. Obviously, this was more in retrospect when looking back on this time period for me.
Yeah. I've seen in the years since Pink Flamingos, and as with most of Water's stuff, it's a interesting watch and sort of niche audience, but just weird, interesting stuff.
Yeah,
that one in particular can be kind of an uncomfortable watch.
Yes. Divine would spend much of the 1970s doing theater, but returned to film and joining Tab Hunter for the first time with Waters' 1981 film Polyester. During this time, Divine would also release disco records and incorporate music into his comedy acts. In 1988, Divine would reunite with Waters for a dual role as a female and male in Hairspray.
Yeah.
So there you go. Divine's performance was widely praised and considered his mainstream breakout role, but 3 weeks later, Divine died of a heart attack. And after he died...
Just 3 weeks later, I didn't know that.
Yeah, after he died, People magazine named Divine the drag queen of the century.
Oh, wow. What a...
Yeah, so I had fleeting recollections of Divine, the larger-than-life drag queen that appeared, throughout the 1980s on talk shows, promoting his music and shows. But, I wasn't real familiar with the actors, much like John Waters. It was a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
Did you have any type of familiarity with
Divine? I had seen some of Hairspray, and I don't remember how, and he cracked me up in that. Yeah, other than that, I sort of vaguely remember some of the music, and I'm not exactly sure how I would have come across that, but did. And so, yeah, it's sort of kicking around in the back of my mind, and certainly as soon as I popped this in, knew who he was. So from childhood, had to have, had some familiarity.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly didn't watch any of the Waters films till much later.
A couple of other casting notes: longtime character actors Lainey Kazan and Jeffrey Lewis, our favorite
buddy
character actor there, helps round out the cast. Kazan, I may be mispronouncing that, Rob, but she plays a saloon owner, and she has the chops here. She has a Tony, a Golden Globe, and a Primetime Emmy nomination. And Jeffrey Lewis, of course, was in our last episode, the very curious Two Coreys movie, Last Resort. Now, I feel if you were a gambler and wanted to play roulette on who will pop up in 80s movies the most, I think Jeffrey Lewis is your guy.
Yeah, he's got to be up there.
Lewis plays Hard Case Harris here in Lust in the Dust. He's the leader of an outlaw gang. And Rob, we have the Cisco Kid, the Joker, however you remember him. Cesar Romero is in this film.
Absolutely. I saw him and was like, wait a minute, and had to look because didn't come to me immediately, but I was like, well, how do I know him? And it's Joker immediately. Yeah. As soon as I brought his name up, I was like, no crap.
Yeah, it's great. Also, Courtney Gaines, the best friend in Can't Buy Me Love, still up all night, episode 11, uncredited here in his first acting appearance.
Yeah, also unbelievably creepy in the Children of the Corn. So
yes.
That's another big one of his, yeah.
Also, Noah Wiley of ER fame.
I missed that.
Yeah. So a perfectly eclectic cast here, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, completely. And there's others too. Nedra Voles pops up in a small, goofy role, and yeah, I also really appreciated the names many of the characters in the film, but I'm sure we'll touch on that later.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like you have a lot of actors kind of towards the end of their career, and then some just getting started. So kind of cool there.
Yeah.
Lust in the Dust first appeared on USA Up All Night on August 18th, 1989, and it would make its last appearance on July 27th, 1991. And in between that roughly 2-year span, it would air a total of 7 times. So,
whoa.
Yeah.
A reasonable run on there.
Yeah. Lust in the Dust was distributed by the formerly Corman-owned New World Pictures. It was made for roughly $3 million, and it would gross just over $700,000. So, as you had mentioned, a sizable loss initially for New World Pictures, though they probably made that up over time with VHS sales and rentals, that sort of thing. All right, Rob, we've got our 6 shooters holstered, and we're ready for the 1980s B-Western parody. Let's saddle up and let's do this, shall we?
Absolutely.
We're gonna break down the plot here. That's quite interesting. The film's opening credits, I thought, did a great job of capturing the spirit of classic westerns. We've got the wide open New Mexico landscape, a little title page with bold, bright red text, and a classic western jingle playing. Any thoughts on just how this thing kicks off? You wouldn't even know that it's an 80s parody. It almost looks like a 1950s western.
Well, and I truly appreciated the song that accompanied the opening credits. As as we've mentioned on many other episodes, that they tend to do songs that are basically a description of what's in store for you.
Yes.
And they do that here.
Yeah.
And the narrator too.
Oh.
It almost to me sounded, and I want to see if you caught it at all, that it was one of the South Park guys putting on a voice.
Okay, yeah.
It's what it sounded like to me.
The narrator tells us that there's a saying that those who lust in the dust die in the dust, which will come back to play at the end of the movie, of course. The narration occurs while Divine's character, Rosie Velez, rides through the New Mexico desert on her way to Chile Verde to become a singer in a cantina in the town. She finds a pond and partially disrobes to bathe while a mysterious figure, a clone of Clint Eastwood, watches on.
There.
And, of course, that's Tab Hunter as legendary gunslinger Abel Wood. So he doesn't say anything while Rosie postulates why he's there. It's, I thought, a hilarious opening scene as Rosie questions what Abel is going to do when he says, "It's me, isn't it? You're going to have your filthy way with me. You're going to ravage me like I've never been ravaged before." And I mean, this goes on for almost 30 seconds.
And he's largely silent the entire time, the strong silent type.
Yeah.
As you said, very much mimicking Eastwood.
Yeah. Just so funny. She's just kind of playing this damsel in distress while, hoping that he comes down and
takes advantage.
Yeah. So Rosie follows Abel after he takes off, and we get a flashback to her run in the day before with Hardcase's gang. So Hardcase Williams being Jeffrey Lewis, as we mentioned earlier, and Hardcase tells Rosie that his group of men are horny and they're going to have their way with her. It's an uncomfortable scene, as many of these moments from the 80s are in these movies. We've talked about that before in quite a few of these films. Obviously we don't see a sexual assault, and afterwards they make light of it with Rosie saying, "Terrible, they had their way with me for hours," before asking, would anybody like to try again, implying that she enjoyed it. So just, a little bit cringy, but I think the sort of tone of it is sort of lightens that some. I guess I don't know how to properly phrase that. And I do have to give credit to Hardcase's gang being racially diverse. Yeah, there you go. So they make up for their off-color humor there.
Yeah, they've got an Asian member, a guy who struck me as a sort of a Ron Jeremy lookalike.
Yeah.
They had a little person in the gang and a black cowboy as well.
Yeah. So Rosie and Abel make it to Chile Verde, where they found the town basically abandoned. The townspeople thought that Abel was Hardcase Williams, and they all ran to hide. And when they return, it's revealed that there's gold hidden somewhere in Chile Verde, something that Hardcase referenced earlier. So we have our MacGuffin here, the hidden gold, apropos for a Western. One of the gags is that people keep accidentally mentioning the gold to Rosie and Abel. When it's like, don't share that with with an outsider, but then they keep doing.
But then they do it over and over again.
Yeah. So the gathering spot in the town is a saloon and brothel owned by Margarita, who's played by Lainey Kazan. Local gunslinger Bernardo, played by longtime character actor Henry Silva, is after Margarita's heart and feels threatened by Abel, so he convinces the townspeople that Abel is after their gold.
Trouble, yeah.
And to lynch him. But Marguerite saves him just before he's hung. Again, kind of an uncomfortable scene.
I love that. And this is like sort of a mini trope where you go to perform some sort of lynching or hanging, and someone whips out a gun and is like a sniper basically. Right. And is able to shoot the rope
with a 6-shooter. So Abel's horse rides off, but he returns to the saloon and kills Bernardo. I was sad to see Bernardo killed. I mean, Silva was playing that character great to the hilt. This is kind of a weird parody because it's just barely a parody. It seems to kind of drift between a comedy and parody. I mean,
very, very much so. I thought that was probably sort of the biggest flaw of the film, in that it starts hard on the comedy and then kind of backs way off and really gets into the plot of we've got to find this gold, and much of the comedy just leaves the movie.
Yeah. So this is when Margarita busts out into song, professing her lust for Abel after he kills Bernardo, to which Abel responds, "You people have a weird sense of humor." Tab Hunter plays the character just completely straight. It's almost like they forgot to tell him that it's a comedy.
Yeah, that at some point you should lighten up.
It's something that Roger Ebert actually picked up on. In his review of the film, he wrote, Hunter underplays until he's almost not present in some of the scenes. So
yeah,
an odd choice there and maybe he was told to play it that way, but it's quite odd. Divine, I think, really saves this film. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Making up for Hunter's wooden performance, her monologue mid-movie to Margarita is hilarious. Let's have a quick listen to that.
What about that limerick?
I can't.
Bitch. Ever since I came here, you've done nothing but treat me like shit. Oh! Who the hell do you think you are? Yeah, I was a damn tall girl, but what makes you so high and mighty? You own a whorehouse. A whorehouse! That was only 3 whores in it. One of them's just a senile old cow. No offense, honey. And the other one's so new at it, she doesn't know which end to use. So what does that make you? The only whore in Chile Verde! Oh! Yeah, I came here for the gold, because I've been poor all my life.
You got it all wrong, honey. You've been cheap all your life.
Cheap? This furniture's cheap.
Hardcase Williams and his gang show up to Chile Verde, and a gunfight ensues in the middle of town. And all that this scene proved that gunfights and comedy don't mix, I think. Yeah. It goes on forever, and Hardcase eventually bests Abel in a fist fight, knocking him into a well. Yeah. Rosie then escapes on a horse, and Hardcase follows. It was a long, drawn-out scene. It's revealed at this point that Rosie has a tattoo on her rear end that's a clue to where the gold is. And Hardcase chases her down, but then she outsmarts him with the old "hey over there" distraction and stabs him in the leg with a bobby pin. Any thoughts on this reveal of the tattoo?
I guess for comedy's sake, it was goofy, but just again sort of a weird plot contrivance and it gets further even.
Yes,
and I'm sure
we'll
get to that.
Yeah, so the tattoo is actually half of a map to the gold, and it's on her butt, and the reveal is that Margarita has the other half on her butt. So Abel knocks both of them out and puts the two of them on the bed face down to form the full map.
The full map, yeah.
Hardcase finds them and goes in chase of Abel. So Rosie and Margarita find out, and they also go after the gold. So you've got several different people here all in chase after this MacGuffin. We get a final climax where everyone shows up at the gold, and we do a funny parody of a standoff. At one point, even the priest, which was Cesar Romero's character, he shows up for the gold, and Jeffrey Lewis says, let's all move around here, almost breaking the fourth wall, saying we've got to make more room on the set for all these characters showing up, which I thought was great. Everybody turns on everyone, which is kind of a reference to the narrator earlier saying, those who lust in the dust die in the dust. And everybody just shoots everybody until only Abel and Rosie are left. And then Rosie turns on Abel and pulls out a little pea shooter to kill him when Big Ed, an old lady from the brothel who Abel was kind to the entire film. She's up.
Sweet on him.
Yes, and so she shows up and saves him, and then they ride off together, Abel and the old lady. They ride off, leaving Rosie pleading for Abel to come back. And that's it. So I loved the climax here, a hilarious back and forth between all of the actors. What'd you think about the way this wrapped up, Rob?
I apropos for the film, it sort of redeemed, because as I sort of indicated earlier, I felt there was a significant stretch where they just forgot about comedy and said, all right, we're just a straight Western. We have to wrap our plot up, and this brought a bunch of that comedy back. So I definitely appreciated it.
Yeah, it's almost like when the map showed up, that's when it really started to take shape, and the narrative actually became cohesive, where it was earlier just characters, wandering around Chile Verde trying to be funny.
Yeah, launching jokes out. Yeah.
So I agree. The way it kind of ramped up towards the end, and of course, we get Rosie in the beginning, hollering out to Abel about being ravaged, and it ends with her, pleading for him to come back. So I thought a great tie-in there, that we end the way we started, right?
Yeah.
So.
Because everybody's hungry for the gold.
Yes, yeah. So good stuff. All right, so what we think of Lust in the Dust now. This is kind of a mixed bag, but what are others saying? Now, Rob, this film actually has tomato critics score, if you can believe it. Yeah, and
that's surprising.
Yeah, and an audience score. So now there are just 9 critics review for the movie. So, Rob, what score from 1 to 100 do you think the tomato meter score is for the critics?
30.
Pretty close. 33%. Yeah.
Okay.
Not bad. How about the general audience score? Do you think it jives with the critics' score? There are more. I'll tell you, Rob, surprisingly, there are more than 1,000 audience reviews.
Oh, wow. I'll say it's higher, and I'll go 56.
Well, despite, I'll just say this. In perhaps the biggest disparity yet, the audience score for our movie, 79%.
Holy moly.
So we've got 33% in critics score, 79% gave it a high freshness rating here.
I would not have expected that.
So let's take a look at some of these audience reviews here. So Martin A. gives it 4.5 out of 5 stars and writes, a classic comedy romp, Divine is just wonderful, Tab Hunter is as great as always, and the rest of the cast fills out every moment with sheer joy. However, this is not a John Waters film, but it has all the trademarks of being one. They don't make films or stars like this anymore. Enjoy this high camp comedy outing. So Martin A., a big fan there.
Big time.
I don't know about making. I guess they don't make stars like this anymore. I mean, where's your Divine? I mean, I don't. So yeah, I mean, there's something to that there.
Yeah.
Robert F. gives it 4 stars and writes, it's most likely because I was such a Blazing Saddles fan, but this was always one of my favorite movies as a kid. Sure, it's immature and crude, but the jokes are funny. The characters have good chemistry, and Lainey Kazan is hot, and hot was in all capitals. Granted, her nude scenes were obviously done with a stand-in, but her attitude alone adds a lot of sexiness to the movie. Now, the fact that Robert F. must really watch a lot of Lainey Kazan because to know that the nude scenes were a stand-in. So there you go.
Which I don't remember her having a nude scene. I mean, I know. Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, we might have seen an edited version of this. I'm not sure. I can't remember the platform in which I watched it. It was streaming, I think, on Prime, maybe.
I watched on Tubi.
Okay, they might have had an edited for television version that made its way to Tubi, but yeah, but it's not all positive, of course. Rob, an unnamed super reviewer, which I feel like if you're going to be a super reviewer on Rotten Tomatoes, you can't hide in the shadows. So anyway, this unnamed super reviewer gave it just half a star, writing, embarrassingly bad. There's not much else to say. The script stinks. The jokes fall flat. The production values are virtually non-existent, and the acting is excruciatingly painful. It is sad to see that circumstances forced Divine to waste her talents on such rubbish. Judging by the abysmal performances that Divine gave in the few films that she made without John Waters, it seems likely that he was as much her muse as she was his. They really brought out the best in one another. So I'll give this unnamed super reviewer a little bit of guff for saying there's not much else to say, and then writing a Robert Ebert-esque review of the film.
And I'm not on board with that review. I didn't love the movie. It's nowhere near half a star.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this was just vicious. So I don't think it was deserved of that much criticism. Another unnamed reviewer gave it 2 stars, right in the middle, writing, too bland. If you're looking for a John Waters type envelope pushing, you're looking in the wrong place. This is just a standard Western comedy along the lines of Three Amigos, though not as funny. So, yeah, I think that somehow maybe, with Divine in this and the connection to John Waters, I think maybe people's expectations might have been a little high. And obviously, the way it was written, thinking that John Waters might be the one directing it. So I think that there were some misses there just with those connections and lack of connections, I'd say.
Agreed.
Okay, so, what are we going to say? Well, let's decide if this is worth staying up all night for, and I think this one might be one of our toughest decisions here. Rob, you've watched the movie. We've heard the mixed reviews about it. What's your final take on Lust in the Dust? Is it worth staying up all night for?
I think I would. I'll go yes on this one. I didn't love it, and like I said, the plot gets kind of the comedic plot gets lost for a bit, which I think hurt it. But there's just too much goofiness in it that I found to be funny and at times even endearing. And Divine's great with the songs, and there's some physical comedy, and there's a couple jokes that they return to that I enjoyed. So I think I'd stay up for it.
I think that this is one of the rare instances where we're split. It almost pains me to say this, but I don't think that it's worth staying up all night for. I think one issue that the film had was trying to play off a film made 40 years earlier. The Western genre wasn't popular in the mid-1980s. I would see, we got a resurgence eventually with movies like Young Guns, Tombstone, and Dances with Wolves, but that was this was pre that time. The comedy didn't just land for me, really. What I would have liked to have seen is maybe a larger parody of the Western genre specifically, and not just a movie that was 40 years past. I just didn't think it was all that funny unless Divine was the focus of the scene.
Well, that's a valid point.
It did contain some of the same tropes of the traditional Western, the silent stranger, the villainous gang of gunslingers, things like that. But it didn't poke enough fun at the Western genre as a whole, I think. So, this was a John Waters style comedy trapped in a Western shell, and it just didn't work for me. So
and I think that connects to the sort of the plot getting lost, where the comedy went away to focus on that, solving the treasure map and the puzzle related, the limerick, that was part of that. That they lost that opportunity to continue those sort of parodies of that Western genre that they could have plugged in during all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this too, where it does impress me is how it captures the feel of a Western. I mean, for a mid-80s kind of just low budget spoof, I thought this movie, it did feel like it was made several decades earlier, during the classical Hollywood era when westerns were still king. So that was really neat. I mean, I'm real big on mise en scène, and I love the look and feel of movies, and especially how they, movies to me are the closest thing to a time machine that we have. And when a film captures a previous time period, I love it. It's like just close your eyes and just step back in time. Well, leave your eyes open so you can watch the movie, but you know what I mean. Push everything out of your mind and just enjoy stepping back in time for a little bit. So this movie surprisingly did a great job of that. Like I said, from that opening title card, just some real little specific things that they got right. But the humor just isn't all that funny to me overall. So as you mentioned, for all the obvious reasons why. So
yeah.
Any last notes, comments on Lust in the Dust, Rob?
Well, similar as it started, it ended with an amazing song.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Again, one of the, it's such a hit or miss, and it got the songs right, the narrator at the beginning, and it was just a lot of the moments in between that missed for me. So, but
which I'd be curious as to, did something go wrong, or was that the plan all along? I
think, as we referenced earlier, just thinking that you're going to have one specific director do this film, and writing to the strengths of that director, and then not having that director do it. So I think that's probably why a lot missed. So
I mean, maybe in hindsight they could have had him. Well, okay, you didn't write it, but you want to take a pass at the, at the script and make some improvements or some changes of your own, and then maybe he would have been on board. And like we said before, it'd be a wildly different movie, I think, at that point.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, the sun is setting on this episode. That's going to do it for Lust in the Dust. And hey, as always, you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter at Still Up Podcast. We always appreciate you jumping on there and following us. We've had a lot of activity recently on Facebook, so we love to see that. And, you can do us a big favor by leaving us a review. We're a small but mighty little podcast that love doing this for you and love just reminiscing about these great movies.
Times past.
That's right. So give us a follow, give us a review if you are so inclined to do, and we will see you for the next episode of Still Up All Night.
You want to hear Chicago's hottest music? Catch all the hits on B96.
You feel the power of love. We don't need another hero.
Nobody plays more music than B96. WBBM FM.